So some of you were with us in that wonderful tiny little room that we were in last Sunday because Green Minds was closed for Easter. And we had a wonderfully spiritually charged, intimate celebration, and we're very glad to be back here in our perfect room. And the title of my talk this morning is New Beginnings. And I thought, well, gee, that's sort of like the thing you talk about on the 1st of January, new beginnings. Okay, so new beginnings. Because we are on the heels of the spring equinox, we're on the heels of Passover, we're on the heels of Easter, and so this concept of rebirth is really, really prevalent right now. And I thought about that for a moment, and two things came up for me. One is that I didn't want it to be generic, and not just a typical nod of the hat to all of those things, but to be more powerful somehow in two ways. So one of those was to look at the why. Why are we talking about new beginnings? And the other was to spend most of our time this morning on the how. Because so often we know about the why. We're all wrapped up in the why. But the how can be a mystery to us. Last month in the Natural Awakenings magazine, I'd written a news brief about planting seeds. And that was this whole teaching encapsulated in language that simply refers to patterns and cycles in nature in which we participate. And one of the parts of that was that the soil in springtime is full of all of that stuff that fell and completed its life last season and is becoming fertile soil. It has become fertile soil. It's packed with nutrients. It might even be fermenting. It is ripe and ready to support new life. So sometimes, on this time of year, we get this, I've already gotten emails from people. I'm cleaning out my closets. I'm changing this. I'm doing that. There's sort of like this instinctive desire to bustle about and make some new beginnings. And there may even be something within us. I know that I felt a little bit of it. We were just talking about Terry McBride before celebration. He calls it creative discontent. There might be a little bit of that festering. And I thought, okay, I'm feeling a little bit of that. I want to kind of clean it. I got too many emails in my email box and files, that are overflowing with unnecessary stuff, and I just want to clear the decks. Well, some of that might be a little creative discontent. It might be a little festering. And a positive, affirmative, empowering way to look at that is to say, wow, I am ripe for new beginnings. The soil of my consciousness is so ready, it will definitely support something new. So, maybe that's where you're at too. That's my interpretation of the why this morning. And my talk is about the how. And the talk about the how reminded me of when I used to spend a lot more time on the road and I listened to public radio. There was something called Science Friday, and it's still on the air. Well, this is like Science Sunday. Because we say that we are religious scientists. This is the Science of Mind Center. And then we say, by the way, that's not Scientology. We might have some things in common, but I don't know what that is. I do know what this is. This is a teaching that was born out of the New Thought movement. It's a teaching that was born out of our freedom to explore and interpret ancient and new wisdom in new ways. To be free to put ideas together in new ways, to interpret them ourselves and have our own experience of revelation. And I talked about that a lot last week. So this is actually about the science of new beginnings. The first bit of science about new beginnings has to do with Newtonian or mechanical physics. The old mechanistic, it's like a clock, it's like a machine. Life is just all of these, parts that fit together and work this way. And that isn't entirely obsolete. We've just added to it greater levels of awareness that shift how we think today. But we start with that, and Newton has the first law of motion. It says two things, basically. That something which is still remains still, unless it is acted upon by an outside force. It also says that something that is in motion remains in motion, unless it is acted upon by an outside force. And then there's a further definition in there, which is that this motion actually consists of what we call it velocity. Really, that it's both its direction and its rate of motion that we're looking at. So to translate that, we'll say, if something's in motion, it's going that way at this speed. And neither the direction nor the speed is going to change, according to this first law of motion, unless there's some other influence. Okay, so put that in your little hat. That's not too hard. My opening line, which I forgot already, was that my day job is not at Max Planck Institute, so I am going to keep this very simple. You know, if somebody works there, I'll just sit down now. Okay. So, we got that part. That's mechanistic physics, right? So we move into something else. We have this thing that we call quantum mechanics or quantum physics, and at the quantum level, we've discovered this, among other things, that when you observe something, it responds to your observation. The very presence of an observer, or any kind of equipment used in the process of observation for measurement, right? Or any expectation on the part of the observer influences the outcome of any experiment. Well, that's where a lot of those guys got mad and sat down. You know, they're like, oh, this wrecks everything that we thought we believed. We think about it now, and we have the privilege of reading, these things interpreted for us by great people. I love Fred Alan Wolfe, by the way. He's my favorite. He was in What the Bleep Do We Know, standing outside, and his hair was kind of on end, and he said, there is no out there. That's Fred Alan Wolfe. Anyway, we have physicists who are into science and spirituality to help us along this road. In any case, this thing called the observer effect means what? It means that how we look at something, and the very fact that we do look at it, and let's say, just roll with me here, that we have some methods of measuring and evaluating things, and the very fact that we're looking, and the quality of our looking, affects the outcome of stuff. Are you with me? Okay. So far we've touched base on the basic mechanical physics, and then we've looked at quantum theory. Now, moving right along, there's this concept of metaphysics. And I learned, thanks to Wikipedia, and I make donations there regularly, I learned from Wikipedia that many of us have misinterpreted what metaphysics are. We've thought that they mean just that which is beyond the physical. And actually, what it is the act of philosophizing about what all this other stuff means in terms of our lives. What does this mean for us? You know, whether you're looking at a new cosmology or you're simply just looking at, well, what does that mean for me? What does that mean about cause and effect? What does that mean about existence? That's typically what we do when we say that we're metaphysicians. I say, how do those things apply to us? So at some point, science and philosophy parted ways, but they've been coming back together, to the consternation of some and to the delight of others. And so when we look at all of this metaphysically, we have an opportunity to say, well, gee, right here in this room, all of us together, what does this mean, this law of motion thing? What does this mean, this observer effect thing? What does that mean for us? What does that mean for our new beginnings? One other person I reference is Meg Wheatley. Meg Wheatley wrote, among other things, a book called Leadership and the New Science. And she created this whole text that is a guide to thinking about leadership in terms of how nature operates, how everyone and everything else in nature likes to do things. So I don't remember what she called it, but in there, one of the things she said is that the best way to get buy-in, for everybody to be together and fully understand something and really get it and be on board with it, is to have the opportunity to explore it, maybe take it all apart and put it back together themselves. Rather than me just telling you something, if we dissect it and put it back together, then we aren't together in this idea. And yes, it may look just like it did before we did that, but we're united in it because we did it together. So we're going to be metaphysicians together right now. And my first question to you then is about that law of motion, that first law of motion. Think about your life. Is there something in your life that's been sitting still that you would like to have be in motion? Is there something else in your life that is moving in a certain direction at a certain rate of speed, and boy, would you like to influence that? Perhaps you'd like it to be moving in another direction. Perhaps you'd like it to be moving at another pace. Perhaps you'd like it not to be doing any of that at all. And what do you require? You require a force of some sort to bring about that change. Okay? Can you think of something? Yes? Okay. Here's the next part. So we look as metaphysicians at quantum physics and we say, oh, there's this thing called the observer effect. And it says that the fact that I'm looking at that, and the way that I'm looking at that, and the forms of measurement I'm applying to that, like my judgment, I might compare my insides to your outsides. I might stand next to a watermark or a yardstick that is not mine to stand next to. And the very fact that I'm looking, that has influence, that has power, it is a force. So can you imagine that the way that you look at that thing that you have in your mind right now, that's either sitting still and you'd like it to move, or moving like crazy and you'd like it to stop, the force that will make that change is your own observation, your own viewpoint, your own looking. That's the force. That's what this teaching is all about. We come in here all the time and we quote ancient wisdom and we quote more contemporary new thought and we cite this person and that person who has brought it to our attention in one way or another. But that's it from a very basic, amateur interpretation of science, which is that force that will either get something going in your life or stop it so that you can then set something else in motion that you do wish to experience is you. We laugh about how there's this point where there's a recognition of personal responsibility, especially when we're in classes and groups together. And we joke about how that's when the door sometimes opens and someone flies out. But the great thing about this is that this is our point of power that we're talking about. Do you remember any times in your life when you, and it could be last week, it could be yesterday, because we all, fall off our knowing now and then, where you thought life was just flying at you. Or maybe you were inside this vehicle known as your life and it's headed that way and you can't find the brakes, like a bad dream, or the steering wheel won't work. This feeling like life is happening to you or happening without your involvement. That's a wonderful thing to give up, isn't it? It's really not fun being afraid and being a victim. It's definitely not empowering blaming someone. That only goes so far before it affects your heart and your stomach and your life and you have no friends left and nobody will listen anymore. So why not think about this? Why not think about letting go of an old way of seeing? An old way of looking at your life? Why not think about grabbing hold of that power that is within you by your very existence that says, whatever you expect, you experience. Whatever you believe, you receive. Whatever you think, you become. It's all the same stuff. You could be talking about as a man thinketh. You could be talking about quantum physics. You could be talking about the teachings of Jesus. You could be talking about who knows what. It's everywhere, and it's not hidden anymore. It's available to us and knocking on the door of our consciousness all the time. So I invite you to put on your imaginary little white lab coats and just think for a moment, okay, if I know nothing else, I know that whatever is sitting still in my life that I would like to have in motion can be by the simple application of force. And whatever is moving along in a direction I don't like, in a speed I'd rather not entertain, can be changed by that same force. And that force is you. That force is how you look at your life when you get up in the morning. And yes, you may need affirmations on the inside of your baseball cap. I used to do those. On your steering wheel, on the bathroom mirror. Frida shared with me these great water-based markers that you can write affirmations on your bathroom mirror, or any mirror in the house, and they wipe off when you're ready to change them. How many of us have lots of refrigerator magnets? Whatever we need to remember, the power is within us. And if you have that little part of you that objects, it's just afraid. Just say, trust me on this one. Let's go for a ride. Try it out. See what you think. If you don't like it, you can have your old life back. Pretty soon, all of you will be on board with this new way of living. And it doesn't have to be just on Sunday morning. It doesn't have to be just when we have a class midweek. It can be all the time. And isn't that awesome? Isn't that awesome? Rather than occasionally having a good day, have every day be a good day. And have that be the rule rather than the exception. So I invite you to take that home with you and to release your old way of being and let go and let something greater steer your life.